Councilor Dwyer.
I think the point that Councilor Spear makes is a really important one for us to talk about, because that is something that really is sort of at the heart for some people of what their concerns are about the contract. And it certainly has influenced my thinking about the contract when I have heard both the police commission and the chief say they recognize that that would be true, that if the cost were to, of the COLA, which is inevitable in all of our departments, that the cost of COLA increase for teachers will do the same thing. That, in other words, it will be harder for the school board to manage their budget when there are increases for teachers, just like it will be harder for the police commission to manage their budget. I've heard both the commission and the chief acknowledge that, understand that that's coming, understand that it will mean that they will not fill vacancies, perhaps downgrade some positions, need to make some adjustments. Acknowledge that, realize that's the outcome of that. And I would say it would be hard for me to think of why I would treat the police differently on that than I would treat school board or other departments. I don't think there has been any move on the part of this council to say teachers shouldn't have COLA, for example. And while the timing for the police is perhaps unfortunate right now in terms of where we are overall in the economy, they have sat out for the last couple of years on any COLA increases. So we're challenged with this sort of, to me, matter of fairness by the department saying, by the commission saying that it understands that this is not going to increase its budget by 6%. They're going to have to absorb, which is your point, Councilor Spear, they're going to have to absorb that and make changes within the department. I think that helps with some of the things that I have understood from members of the public who feel that this is an automatic raise in the police budget. It's not. It does mean that they're challenged to do what Councilor Spear said. I've heard them say that they accept that. Just a couple little things. I think it is useful for us to think about the comparisons between the private sector and public employment. And as was mentioned, I'm a private sector person. I've chosen not to go into public employment. I think, though, the terms of employment are different in the private sector and the public sector. Lots of different terms that are public and private. There's some comparabilities and there's some, non-comparabilities. I certainly wouldn't want to have quit working 20 or 30 years ago, but if I were a public employee and if I were a public safety employee, I might have a different perspective on that. So I don't want to just transfer them over one to each other. I think they inform each other well, but I think we can't, because I've heard it a lot from the private sector. I didn't get this year, I didn't get that. Well, I didn't either, but that doesn't mean that that's exactly how I think about public employment. I think that's one thing. I think a second thing I heard most frequently from members of the public and had the opportunity to have good conversations with people that I had a chance to talk to. The thing that I heard people were upset about was what they perceived to be a 6% annual raise, simply misinformation, as Mr. MacDonald raised. So when I explained to people what COLA is, what a rolling average COLA was, how that played out over the contract, that, for many people, was a completely different perspective on whether they thought this contract should be approved or not. I've heard some confusion tonight over this issue of what does it mean to have a 10-year rolling average. It doesn't mean you pick the high years and you let the low years go. It means you average them out so that you can stabilize what your increases are. This community has had a history of trying to stabilize everything. We try to stabilize health. We try to stabilize contributions to lots of things so we won't have the spikes. And that's why, people are looking at Portsmouth and saying, what are you guys doing different than other communities, because you seem to be able to be managing this pretty well. So it's not like pick a high year, pick a low year. It's looking at 10 years and averaging it out. So how will that average out going forward? Well, the low years that we've had right now are going to keep us lower than they might be had if inflation takes off. So that's a confusion. I would say the one other thing, and I do disagree with Councilor Clayburgh on this, who is always lovely and always sees the best of all sides of things. But, you know, we spent the first 2 hours here talking about trying to educate the public about budget issues. I totally believe in that. And we saw, as Mr. MacDonald said, a deliberate misinformation campaign over the last week. And most of the people who I talked to, I think by the end of the conversation, felt they had been taken in by that deliberate misinformation campaign. So I do think, and I'm glad Councilor Dwyer is raising these questions, because I think we've got to find a different way to get more education out there and get more people knowledgeable about the terms of the contracts, so they can't so easily be taken in by you know, something that gets left on their doorstep and says everybody's getting 6% annual pay increases. We have to find ways to get our information out more clearly.
Thank you, Councilor Dwyer. Councilor Coviello.
Could I have a clarification and who do you think was providing the misinformation campaign?
I'm going to just say from the chair that Councilor Dwyer's remarks are legislative comment. She makes them. It's not a trial. It's not, you know, if she indicates that the information was out there, I don't know that it's incumbent upon any of us to require her to say who may have put out that misinformation.
With the clarifications I've heard tonight, I stand by what I have said.
Councilor Smith.